Planning your progressions week to week in training is massively important for the simple reason that it minimizes the amount of times you plateau in exercise. It minimizes the amount of times that you try and put on too much weight and end up finding you're not strong enough for that weight. So then going backwards and then you're just chasing your tail for a week or two, ultimately wasting an exercise or two or however many that you find yourself doing that with throughout your training. We want to maximize the amount of times that we're progressing in a positive sense in a way that's uninterrupted. So planning your progressions or just having some sort of intelligent method behind how you operate and how you progress in your training is really important. So how best to do this? Now, the first thing I want to bring people's attention to, and probably the most important form of progression for someone who's a beginner, for example, is progressing your technique. It's not just progressing your technique, but it's progressing your confidence within your own ability to perform and develop your technique. So if you're someone who's a beginner and you're really not feeling your ability to do something, you're never going to lift significantly heavy weights anyway. So therefore, the best thing to do in that scenario is just progress your technique. It's okay if you do the same weight for the same reps for an extra week, but it feels much better. You really feel it in the target muscle a lot more. Your control of the weight is better. Your confidence is better. That's something that you can be really, really proud of. So if you're one of those people, then don't think that every week you need to be increasing the weight if your technique is really messed up. Okay? Now, that's one form of progression, but there's many others. And the most valuable ones, once you've established good technique and at least are 75% confident with your technique, the most valuable ones for growth are increasing the weight and increasing the reps you achieve with the same weight. And these are best suited for different circumstances. Now, I just wanted to highlight here that if your focus is strength, then you might have very specified, consistent increases in weight that we're trying to encourage you to do week per week, but that's usually not for every exercise and usually not for every client. Generally speaking, for people who are just trying to simply progress week to week with your accessories or just your normal exercises, then you will have the option of either increasing the weight or either sticking with the same weight and increasing the reps that you achieve week to week. The general rules are if you ever want to increase the weight, only ever increase the weight by about 5 to 10%. And the reason I say this is because all too often do I see people doing a shoulder press with a barbell, and one week they do 40 kilograms, and then the next week they feel a little bit stronger, so they put on an extra 10 and they do 50. Now, I understand 4, then 5, so 40, then 50, but usually you're not 25% stronger week to week. Usually you're only about 5 and maybe up to 10% stronger. So therefore, instead of increasing the weight from 40 to 50, your next jump would just be 42 and a half. I can't stress how important those little 1.25 kilogram plates are in the gym. So the idea there, if you ever do want to increase the weight, is keep it manageable in order to keep it consistent. Now, you don't always need to increase the weight. And in fact, you can shoot yourself in the foot if you always demand that of yourself week to week, because it's not always wise. Say, for example, the rep range on the program for a given set that you're doing, say for the shoulder press, is 8 to 12. And you do the same weight, 40 kilograms. I'll use that same example. You do 40 kilograms one week, but you only achieve 8. Now, the rep range is 8 to 12 for a reason. We specify that for a reason to manage fatigue and make sure that your progressions are consistent. That's our end of the deal. If you've only achieved 8, that is the bottom end of the rep range. You probably don't want to increase the weight at all next week when you come back and do that exercise. You want to do 40 again and again until you achieve pretty much the higher end of the rep range, if not the highest end of the rep range. And then that's when you must increase the weight. And all this does is it keeps it safe. Because what might happen is if you've only done 8 and you come back the following week and you try and do 42 and a half, even though that's a manageable progression, technically speaking, you might only do 7 or you might only do 8. And if you drop below the bottom end of the rep range, we've specified that rep range for a reason. You might find that you stop progressing that exercise completely. So just make sure that you're following these simple rules. If your technique's messed up, stick with the same weight until you figure it out. And in some rare cases, you can even drop the weight. But make sure that your technique and your confidence is at least 75% there before you start trying to be aggressive with progressing the weight and reps. And then once that is in place, when you want to increase the weight, if you ever do, and probably only when you achieve the higher end of the rep range intended on the program, only increase it by about 5 to 10%. And then if you've achieved the lower end of the rep range, then our advice is don't progress that exercise in weight, progress it in reps until you achieve the top end of the rep range. And that's the simple guidelines. Now, as I said, there's some people out there whose goals differ and you might not want to follow these things, but usually those people are more advanced and have an understanding anyway. If you're just general population, people who have never really paid attention to progressing in the gym before, and someone especially who's pursuing physique development, then these general rules should keep you right in 99.9% of cases.